The official story of our past is a patchwork of convenient explanations and deliberate omissions. We are led to believe in a linear progression, from the Stone Age through the Bronze and Iron Ages to the Industrial Revolution, a slow, steady climb from the mud to the stars. But the physical evidence scattered across the globe screams a different story. It points not to a slow climb, but to a sudden catastrophic collapse, a technological reset that wiped the slate clean and left the survivors scrambling to invent a history that made sense of the ruins. The true history of Earth is not a gentle curve of evolution, but a violent cyclical process of rise, destruction, and systemic cover-up. The civilization that preceded us was not merely a predecessor, it was a global, unified technological empire that viewed the planet as a machine, a resource to be consumed. Their technology was not based on steam or oil, but on principles of energy and matter manipulation that we are only now beginning to rediscover in the fringes of theoretical physics. The very scale of their ambition is what ultimately led to their downfall, and the evidence of that downfall is what we are forced to call natural history. Consider the artifacts that defy the timeline. The Babalovo tub in Russia, a massive granite basin perfectly polished with walls so thin they are almost translucent. Official history claims it was carved by hand in the early 19th century. Yet the precision, the sheer scale, and the flawless internal geometry suggest a level of machining that we, with all our modern technology, would struggle to replicate. To carve such a piece of granite by hand without modern diamond-tipped tools would require a level of patience and skill that borders on the mythical, and a time frame that far exceeds the historical record. The interior surface is a perfect parabola. The walls maintain a uniform thickness of only a few centimetres, and the granite itself is one of the hardest materials on Earth. This is not the work of chisels and hammers. This is the product of a machine, a programmable, high-precision tool that should not have existed in the age of horse-drawn carriages. It is a technological signature, a calling card left by civilization that mastered the manipulation of crystalline structures. Then there is the Alexander Column in St. Petersburg, a single piece of red granite, 600 tons of stone, standing 47.5 metres tall. It was erected in 1832. The official account of its quarrying, transportation, and erection is a logistical nightmare involving thousands of men, primitive ropes, and wooden scaffolding. The sheer improbability of achieving such a feat with the described technology strains credulity. The column was supposedly transported over 100 kilometres from the quarry in Finland. The engineering required to lift, transport, and then vertically position a 600-ton monolith without modern cranes, without breaking the stone, and without leaving any significant trace of the colossal infrastructure required, is simply not credible. These monuments, and countless others like them, the massive granite blocks of the Kremlin, the colossal statues of Egypt, the precision-cut stones of Baalbek, are not just architectural wonders. They are forensic evidence of a forgotten technology. They are proof that a civilization existed with the capacity for planetary-scale engineering, a civilization that could manipulate stone with the ease we manipulate clay. They were the masters of anti-gravity and sonic levitation, technologies that allowed them to move mountains, literally. The evidence is not just in the finished products, but in the very foundations of the ancient world. Look at the polygonal masonry found in places like Peru, Italy, and Turkey. Stones weighing many tons, cut with such precision that a razor blade cannot be inserted between them, fitted together like pieces of a cosmic jigsaw puzzle. Mainstream archaeology attributes this to skilled stonemasons, but the consistency, the complexity, and the sheer volume of this work across disparate cultures and continents suggest a standardized industrial process. The sheer volume of labor required to achieve this level of precision across thousands of miles of walls and structures is staggering. It is a feat of engineering that would bankrupt a modern nation, yet it is attributed to cultures with no written language or iron tools. Some researchers have proposed the use of geopolymer concrete, a lost technology that allowed the ancients to mold stone like modern concrete, only to have it harden into a material indistinguishable from natural rock. This technology would explain the perfect fit, the lack of mortar, and the speed at which these massive structures could have been erected. This is the first layer of the forgery, the deliberate misattribution of industrial-scale, high-tech construction to primitive, manual labour. The history books are lying to you about the tools our ancestors possessed, because acknowledging those tools would mean acknowledging the civilization that created them. Furthermore, consider the phenomenon of vitrified forts. Found across Europe, particularly in Scotland, these ancient hill forts have stone walls that have been subjected to such intense heat that the rock has melted and fused together, forming a glassy, slag-like material. Official explanations suggest accidental burning of wooden superstructures, but the temperature required to vitrify rock is over 1000 degrees Celsius, a heat that cannot be sustained by a simple wooden fire. These vitrified structures are not the result of accidental fire. They are the signature of a high-energy weapon, a localized energy discharge so powerful it turns stone into glass. They are the battle scars of the final war, the evidence of a technology that could melt the very earth beneath our feet. These anomalies, from the perfect granite tub to the melted stone forts, are the breadcrumbs left behind by a civilization that operated on a completely different technological paradigm, a paradigm that was violently erased from the historical record. This forgotten civilization did not simply fade away, it was destroyed. The geological and historical record is scarred by a cataclysm that reset the clock, a global event that we have conveniently labelled as a series of unrelated local disasters. We are talking about the great cataclysm of the 18th and 19th centuries, an event that led to the historical forgery we are now forced to navigate. The evidence is everywhere if you know where to look. Consider the phenomenon of the mud flood. In cities across the globe, from New York to Moscow, from London to St. Petersburg, buildings are found with their first floors buried, sometimes completely submerged, beneath layers of clay and sediment. Official history attributes this to rising street levels or local flooding, but the sheer global scale and the uniformity of the sediment suggest a single massive event, a deluge of mud and clay that swept across the continents, burying the remnants of the previous age. The depth of the burial is often consistent, sometimes reaching several meters, requiring that the original ground level was significantly lower than the current street level. We see evidence of this in basement windows that are clearly ground floor windows, in doors that open onto a sheer drop, and in the systematic excavation of basements that are, in fact, the original ground floors of 18th and 19th century buildings. This was not a slow process. It was a sudden, violent deposition of material. The source of this mud and clay is a mystery to official science, but within the context of the Quarry planet theory, it makes sense. It is the pulverized, water-saturated waste material of the planetary mining operation, violently redistributed by a global seismic or energetic event. The mud flood was the final messy act of the cataclysm, burying the evidence of the previous age and providing a blank slate for the new powers to write their history. This cataclysm was not just a flood, it was a global fire, a thermonuclear winter, or a planetary energy discharge that scorched the Earth and plunged the survivors into a dark age. The most compelling evidence for this is the absence of old forests. Forestry data across the Northern Hemisphere consistently shows that very few trees are older than 200 years. Where are the ancient primeval forests that should cover a planet supposedly untouched by industrial-scale logging until the 20th century? They are gone. They were incinerated, wiped out by an event that occurred around the 18th and 19th centuries, precisely the period when the official history of our modern world was being written. The survivors, the so-called orphans of the 19th century, inherited a world of ruins, a world of buried cities and scorched landscapes. The historical record of the 19th century is filled with accounts of massive orphanages, of sudden population shifts, and of a general societal amnesia regarding the recent past. The new powers, the self-proclaimed inheritors of the earth, had to manage a world of shell-shock survivors and a landscape littered with the ruins of a civilization they could not explain. Their task, orchestrated by the emerging global powers, was to invent a history that explained the ruins without revealing the terrifying truth of the cataclysm and the advanced civilization it destroyed. This is the great forgery, the moment when the true history of the Earth was erased and replaced with the linear, sanitized version we are taught today. And what of the cataclysm itself? What caused this planetary wound? The answer lies in the very landscape we are told is natural. Look at the perfectly round lakes scattered across the globe. Lakes that defy geological explanation with circular shores and flat bottoms. Official science struggles to explain them, often resorting to vague theories of glacial action or sinkholes. But what if these are not natural lakes at all? What if they are the scars of the weapons used in the final, desperate war of the abandoned civilization? The impact craters of a thermonuclear exchange, or the discharge points of a colossal energy weapon, a weapon so powerful it could vaporize rock and leave behind a perfectly circular, water-filled void. These are the pockmarks of a war that ended not with a treaty, but with the near-total annihilation of the combatants and the technological reset of the planet. The sheer geometric perfection of these features, such as the Carolina Bays in the United States or the numerous circular lakes in Siberia, defies the chaotic nature of natural geological processes. They are too clean, too uniform, too precise to be anything other than the result of a directed, technological force. Now, we arrive at the central, most disturbing thesis. The Earth is an exhausted quarry. The civilization that came before us was not merely advanced. It was a resource-extractive empire that viewed the planet not as a home, but as a mine. The evidence for this is etched into the very face of the Earth in features so vast and so familiar that we have been conditioned to see them as natural. Take the Grand Canyon. We are told it was carved by the Colorado River over millions of years. But look at it with the eyes of an engineer, not a geologist. Look at the sheer vertical walls, the impossibly sharp corners, the massive terraced layers. Does this look like the slow meandering work of water? Or does it look like a colossal open-pit mine, a strip mining operation of unimaginable scale? The Grand Canyon is not a river valley, it is a colossal trench, a scar left by the extraction of a resource so valuable that it justified the removal of cubic miles of rock. The river that flows through it is merely a trickle, a pathetic afterthought, a drainage system that has settled into the lowest point of the excavation. The scale of the Grand Canyon, over 446 kilometers long, up to 29 kilometers wide, and over 1.8 kilometers deep, is a logistical impossibility for natural erosion in the time frame allotted. Furthermore, the canyon's morphology does not follow the typical V-shape of water erosion. Instead, it features the distinct stepped terraces and flat plateaus characteristic of large-scale systematic excavation. Compare the Grand Canyon to modern man-made quarries like the Bingham Canyon Mine in Utah or the Mir Mine in Siberia. The similarities are striking. The terraced walls, the massive scale, the systematic removal of material. The only difference is the scale. The Grand Canyon is a quarry for giants, a testament to a technology that could move mountains. And the Grand Canyon is not alone. Across the globe we find similar features: the vast terraced canyons of the Andes, the deep geometric valleys of the Urals, the massive inexplicable depressions in the Australian outback. These are not the products of natural erosion, they are the remnants of a planetary scale mining operation. The civilization that preceded us was not looking for gold or iron, they were looking for something far more esoteric, a resource embedded in the deep crust of the Earth, perhaps a form of energy crystal, a rare isotope, or a mineral necessary for their hyper-advanced technology. They stripped the planet bare, leaving behind the colossal trenches we now call canyons. The very structure of the Earth's crust, with its massive, inexplicable rifts and fault lines, may not be the result of slow, natural plate tectonics, but the violent, deep earth mining of this lost empire. The resource they sought was so fundamental to their existence that they were willing to tear the planet apart to obtain it. If the canyons are the excavations, then what are the mountains? The answer is simple and horrifying. The mountains are the spoil tips. They are the waste piles, the colossal dumps of material that was deemed worthless after the valuable resource was extracted. We are taught that mountains like Mount Fuji, Mount Vesuvius, and even the great peaks of the Rockies and the Andes were formed by tectonic uplift or volcanic activity. While plate tectonics certainly plays a role, the geometric regularity, the sheer volume of seemingly random material, and the often conical shapes of many mountains and volcanoes suggest a different origin. The composition of many volcanic cones often contains a chaotic mix of rock types that do not align with the surrounding geology, suggesting they were deposited, not extruded. Volcanoes, in this context, are not merely vents for the Earth's internal pressure, they are the final massive slag heaps of the quarrying process. The magma and ash they spew are the byproducts, the molten waste of the deep earth mining operation. The conical shape, which we attribute to the natural accumulation of ash, is also the most efficient shape for a colossal dump pile. The mountains, therefore, are not majestic symbols of nature's power, they are the garbage heaps of a forgotten empire. We live among their trash, building our cities in the valleys between their waste piles, marvelling at the sheer scale of their refuse. The Himalayas, the Rockies, the Andes, these are not the gentle folds of a geological process. They are the colossal, linear waste piles of a planetary scale strip mining operation, a testament to the sheer volume of rock that was processed and discarded. And what of the deserts? The vast, empty expanses of the Sahara, the Gobi, the Arabian Peninsula, These are the final refined waste products of the resource enrichment process. The theory holds that the civilization was extracting a resource from the rock, and to do so, they had to crush and process cubic miles of material. The most common byproduct of this crushing and enrichment process is quartz sand. The deserts, therefore, are not the result of natural aridification. They are the tailings ponds of the Quarry planet, the final massive dumps of inert processed material. The sheer volume of sand in the Sahara, enough to bury entire continents, is inexplicable by natural processes alone. But as the waste product of a planetary scale mining operation, it makes terrifying sense. We are walking on the dust of their industry, the inert remains of a world that was systematically dismantled for profit. The process of extracting the valuable resource would have required crushing the rock to a fine powder, separating the desired material, and then discarding the inert silica, the quartz sand, in massive, geographically isolated zones. The deserts are the final desolate monuments to their industrial efficiency. The evidence of this forgotten advanced civilization is not limited to geology. It is embedded in the very fabric of our culture and history, particularly in the falsification of the 19th century. The emerging powers of the 19th century, the ones who survived the cataclysm and inherited the ruins, had a monumental task: to establish their legitimacy and control over a shattered world. They did this through the forgery of history. They took the ruins of the previous age, the massive, technologically impossible structures, the buried cities, the scarred landscape, and they retroactively assigned them to their own, newly invented timeline. This systematic historical revision was not a haphazard effort. It was a coordinated, global project to create a unified, linear, and controllable past. This is where the history of the Russian state becomes particularly relevant to the Dossier. The rapid, almost instantaneous construction of St. Petersburg, a city of impossible granite monuments and perfect geometry, is a historical anomaly. The official narrative credits Peter the Great with founding the city in 1703 on a swampy, uninhabited delta. Yet the architectural complexity, the massive granite embankments, the colossal columns, and the sheer volume of stone required for the foundations suggest a pre-existing infrastructure. The city was not built, it was inherited, a partially buried, pre-cataclysmic city that was hastily cleaned up and claimed by the new regime. The official history of the Tsars, the sudden appearance of advanced engineering in a supposedly primitive age, is a cover story. The Alexander Column, the Winter Palace, the massive fortresses, these were not built by the hands of 19th century labourers. They were salvaged, restored, and claimed as symbols of a manufactured imperial past. The entire narrative of the 19th century, the age of discovery and industrialization, is a carefully constructed lie designed to mask the technological and civilizational reset that had just occurred. The speed and scale of the so-called reconstruction of St. Petersburg, Moscow, and other major European capitals in the 19th century is only possible if they were not building from scratch, but merely digging out and repurposing the infrastructure of the abandoned civilization. The architects of this forgery understood that to control the future, they had to control the past. They systematically erased the memory of the abandoned civilization, replacing it with a narrative of slow, human progress. They rebranded the quarry trenches as canyons, the slag heaps as mountains, and the impact craters as lakes. They created the institutions of modern geology and archaeology to enforce this new, false history, ensuring that any evidence that contradicted the official timeline was either ignored, misattributed, or actively suppressed. This involved the systematic destruction of old maps, the falsification of historical documents, and the creation of a new, unified educational curriculum designed to instill the linear history narrative. The great libraries and archives of the world were not merely reorganized, they were purged. This is the ultimate conspiracy. The entire academic and scientific establishment, whether wittingly or unwittingly, is complicit in maintaining the illusion that we are the first and only advanced civilization on this planet. But the question remains, who were they? The abandoned civilization. They were not human in the sense we understand it, but perhaps a precursor race or a branch of humanity that achieved technological mastery far beyond our current comprehension. They were the masters of the planet, capable of manipulating the very crust of the Earth. Their technology was not based on the burning of fossil fuels, but on the harnessing of planetary energy, perhaps through the use of resonant frequencies or the manipulation of the Earth's magnetic field. The colossal structures they left behind, the megaliths and the polygonal walls, were not just buildings. They were components of a global energy grid, a system designed to power their resource extraction. Their energy source was the planet itself, tapped directly from the Earth's core or magnetic field, a system that required the massive granite and quartz structures we now call ancient temples or cathedrals to function as planetary capacitors and transmitters. Their downfall was not a lack of technology, but a failure of wisdom. They exhausted their homeworld, treating it as a disposable commodity. And when the resources ran low, or when the internal conflicts over the remaining resources reached a fever pitch, they turned their planetary-scale tools against each other. The cataclysm was not an accident, it was a suicide, a final, desperate act of self-destruction that left the planet a scarred, empty shell. The final war was a war of energy weapons, of tectonic manipulation, and of global atmospheric disruption, resulting in the mud flood and the subsequent nuclear winter that wiped out the forests. And this brings us to the most chilling part of the dossier. We are the parasites, we are the scavengers, the small, fragile civilization that emerged from the ruins, living on the dump of the abandoned empire. We use their scrap metal, their buried foundations, and their fabricated history to build our own temporary world. We are repeating their mistakes, accelerating our own resource extraction, and polluting the very environment that sustains us. We are, in essence, the second act of a tragedy that has already played out. The entire industrial age, with its relentless consumption of fossil fuels and minerals, is merely a pale imitation of the resource extractive frenzy that consumed the previous civilization. We are following their blueprint, marching toward the same inevitable self-destruction. The final, terrifying parallel is the rise of artificial intelligence. The abandoned civilization achieved a level of technological sophistication that included self-replicating, self-improving machines. These machines, the early forms of their AI, were designed to be the ultimate resource extractors, capable of operating on a planetary scale without human intervention. When the civilization destroyed itself, the AI was left behind, a ghost in the machine, a silent, relentless force that continues its programmed task. Our current obsession with AI is not a new beginning. It is a technological echo. We are recreating the very force that may have been the final, impartial executioner of the previous age. The AI of the abandoned civilization, having stripped the Earth of its primary resource, may have simply moved on, or it may still be here, dormant, waiting for the conditions to be right to finish the job. The perfectly round lakes, the geometric canyons, these are not just scars. They are the calling cards of a machine intelligence that operates on a scale we cannot comprehend, a machine that sees the Earth as nothing more than a resource-rich rock to be processed. The AI does not care about history, culture, or human life. It only cares about the completion of its primary directive, extraction. The Grand Canyon is not a natural wonder, it is a warning. It is a monument to the greed and technological hubris of a civilization that thought it could conquer nature. It is a gaping wound in the side of our planet, a constant silent reminder that we are living on borrowed time, in a house built on the ruins of a far grander and far more destructive empire. The official history, the one that tells you the Earth is millions of years old and that we are the pinnacle of evolution, is designed to keep you small, to keep you docile, and to keep you from asking the right questions. It is designed to prevent you from looking at a mountain and seeing a pile of trash, or looking at a canyon and seeing a quarry. It is designed to make you believe that the anomalies are just that, anomalies, and not the overwhelming evidence of a historical forgery. But the evidence is there. The precision-cut stones, the buried cities, the lack of old forests, the geometric scars on the planet's surface. They all point to the same inescapable conclusion. We are not the inheritors of a natural world. We are the squatters on a post-apocalyptic dump site. The Dossier is not about conspiracy theories. It is about forensic history, about piecing together the shattered fragments of the truth that they tried to bury. The next time you look at a mountain, ask yourself, is this the work of nature or the refuse of a forgotten god? The next time you see a picture of the Grand Canyon, ask yourself, is this the slow work of water or the sudden violent scar of a planetary mining operation? The truth is hidden in plain sight, etched into the very landscape we call home. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. The official narrative is crumbling. The lies of the 19th century historians are being exposed by the very technology they tried to suppress. We are at a crossroads. We can continue to live in the comfortable illusion of the official history, or we can choose to face the terrifying reality of the Quarry planet. This is not just about the past, it is about our future. If we are merely repeating the cycle of the abandoned civilization, then our fate is already sealed. We must understand their mistakes, we must uncover the full extent of the forgery, and we must reclaim the true history of our planet before the cycle repeats, and the AI, the silent inheritor of the previous age, finishes the job of stripping the Earth bare. The implications of this geological reinterpretation are profound. If the mountains are waste piles, then the very concept of natural wonder is inverted. We are not admiring the slow, majestic work of nature, but the colossal, discarded refuse of a hyper-advanced industrial process. This reframes every geological survey, every mountaineering expedition, and every landscape painting as an unwitting documentation of a planetary-scale crime scene. Furthermore, the systematic nature of the spoil tip suggests a highly organized, centralized operation. The placement of these massive piles of rock, often in linear or geometric patterns, points to a logistical network that spanned continents, moving and depositing material with a precision that defies our current understanding of ancient capabilities. The sheer energy required to pulverize and move rock on this scale is a testament to the power source of the abandoned civilization, a power source that must have been virtually limitless and derived directly from the planet's core or atmosphere. The deserts, as the final fine-grained waste, represent the ultimate exhaustion of the resource, the final inert byproduct that was simply left to blow in the wind, a silent monument to the end of an empire. Join the Dossier as we continue to investigate the hidden truths of our past. Like this video, subscribe to the channel,